So yesterday I completed a menu theme, a piece of music for a game. A game. It's nothing like a big game or anything like that. It's something my one very good friend is working on for college, and he got to get accepted into a team there at the college, who is currently developing like a sort of mix between you know, educational game and, game genre proper. I won't mention what it is, but yeah, proper like game genre proper and mixed with edutainment sort of thing. And so apparently they weren't going to do sound effects or music for this, apparently. So, I asked like, "Hey, would you mind if I give it a go? I compose music and I do sound effects." And so far they liked all the sound effects I did. And then last night, well, actually yesterday, pretty much all yesterday, I spent the day finishing up the composition. So yeah, I did it. I mean, I managed it. I think by 10 o'clock last night, I managed to finish the menu theme. I like it. I like it a lot. It's not the greatest thing I've ever done or anything like that. In fact, in some ways, it's more simple than I would like it to be. It's like it's the predictable kind of chord voicing, predictable kind of melody. It kind of goes where you expect it to. But you know what? That's fine. Not every. I still really like it, and there's still things I like immensely about it. It's because before that I had composed another piece of music. I'm at least relieved that when I go to compose music, I can make ones that are as, more complicated or complex as I want there to be. A bit of some counterpoint, different voicings, and different tempos, and the speeds change and decrease. The time signatures change, but I don't always want it to just be 4/4 time simple, straightforward melodies all the time. That kind of thing where it's like, oh, okay, I know where then it's gonna reap. So you do like ba da do, and then the next part is da. Just doing it again. Ba da 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 ba da 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 ba da 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 ba da da da. Do 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 ba da 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 ba da da do do. Yeah, something like that. Not great, but it's a melody. Oh, I'm fading away. Goodbye. This is the end for me. Okay. Got some phlegm in my throat that caused that. Excuse me. But it's a melody kind of like that, where it's like do 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 ba da do 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 ba do 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 ba do 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 ba do 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 boo 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 do boo do ba do ba ba do 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 ba do ba do do ba do ra ba do 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 do, something like that. But yeah. So I finished that, and then I went to bed. I worked on that pretty much all day yesterday. Send that in. I don't think I'm gonna get paid for it. I think It's the kind of thing where it's like, oh, you volunteered your time. Yeah. But again, one of those small steps. Maybe something will come of it. I hope so. Small steps. But yeah, so I gotta make up some of that time with the remote job today. Make up some of that time. Yeah. I woke up today a bit earlier, and I was, well, now is earlier. I'm saying that as if I missed it. No, I'm in that time right now. I'm up earlier, and I was going to play an hour of Metroid Prime, and then, prime that to get released later, and then do some work. But then, like, I even have it open right now. I got the controller right there. TV's on. It's on the menu. But then... And then my stomach had other plans. It was like, you haven't eaten yet. Where's breakfast? So yeah, I'm starting to cook right now. Starting breakfast, which is basically my dinner and my lunch. Like, regardless, I have one meal a day. The other day I was talking about how at work, I have a nice big meal, and then I at least try to, pick something good. And then that's pretty much my meal for the day, unless, I really get super hungry later. But pretty much every day is just a meal a day. So, what I have for breakfast is my lunch and my dinner. It's just like a piece of chicken. It's just like a big chunky piece of chicken, and then I cook it up. I got some stuff to put with it. There's salt. I got some red pepper and some onion, some purple, or is it red onion? Some red onion, and chop it up. Stick it in the pan with it, and then I eat that. Sometimes I'm able to have Brussels sprouts with it, but sometimes I also run out of Brussels sprouts. So I don't have any Brussels sprouts right now to have with my chicken. But yeah, one of the things that's always the most worrisome part of going to bed a little later is that's when I have my most harrowing dreams. The ones that, like, wake me up with the feeling of, like, dread and irritation. So my dream last night, it was I had two main ones, but they were strange little things. But the first one was that I was in this place, and someone came and took one of my propane tanks, and then took it to their place, and then my place didn't have any, and the kittens were still in it. But then they took it to their place, but then it turns out at their place that they were designing an atomic bomb. They were designing an atomic bomb, like, right out in the open. They had, like, a little canopy set up over it. It was like a bunch of students building a bomb. And they needed the propane tank for, like, a second, and they were going to return it to me once they were done. But they had, like, a whole computer set up. They had this, and they were, like, being very careful. And they just had to design, like, an element of it, Nothing huge, just an element of it, get it to function. They were, like, studying it. They were doing some kind of analysis on it. It didn't seem like it was going to blow up. It wasn't primed to. There was some caution around it, but it seemed that it was more of like a project that they were doing. And then later in that same dream, I went back to, it didn't look like this place necessarily, but I identified it in the dream as where I live, and, like, the walls were coming apart. And it's similar to, like, the flooding thing where, like, water keeps that recurring theme of, like, water washing this place away. Well, this time it was like I looked at the corner, and when you have, like, two pieces of plywood and they're kind of separated and you see the nails hanging between the two parts, and you just want to take the hammer and just kind of knock them together to seal them. It was like that. It was like this place was more like a wooden box. And there was a part where like the connections at the corners split and you could see the nails and like a gap to the outside, and it was going to rain. It was awful. It was very, very awful. And then afterwards, I had multiple like series of dreams where the other person kept trying to like gaslight me into various situations or guilt me into doing different things, or would like suddenly find a way in and then start pulling out things to try and delegitimize me, or say like you're not capable of taking care of anything, that kind of stuff. I mean, it's the kind of stuff that the other person would do before. Literally, one night the other person went around in a panicked frenzy around the house looking for the slightest like thing that's off center, or the slightest smudge, and kept saying like, as long as this is here, you'll never be able to live on, you'll always, you'll never be an adult, you'll never grow up, you'll never be able to take care of anything. This just shows me that you can't function on your own. The other person was just trying to look for some way to not to clean up anything. The pretense was that the other person suddenly wanted to clean up everything. But what they were literally doing was going through drawer to drawer, looking for the most minute, like off-center, slight smudge, like panicked, like almost hyperventilating. Just like, you'll never be able to take care of anything. I'll always have to be in charge and taking care of everything. Like, it was something. It was right after I had set a boundary with the other person that, like, right now I need to be able to focus on this work that I'm doing. I won't be able to take care of those things right now, and you'll need to be able to wake yourself up in the morning. I can no longer be your alarm that gets you up every single day and then does your whole morning routine for you. And then the other person just went on that whole thing of like, oh, you're trying to take over, you're trying to usurp me, and then started going on this like trek around the house, just looking for literally anything, literally the smallest thing, of just like, this was off center, this can shouldn't be here. It should be grouped over here. It's too low. The seasoning is too low, and all kinds of stuff. Just started rummaging through the entire place, just looking for the smallest thing to be like, delegitimize and find ways to lift themselves up and make themselves look like, they're the only one capable and things like that. But it was kind of funny seeing that, because then it began to realize just how little the other person knew the place that they were living in and how much they had left squarely on me to take care of, because half the time the other person didn't even know what was going to be up in those cabinets, what was going to be in different places. Like, literally left me to know where things are, their clothing, their food, their stuff, their equipment, their everything. And it was also the day that I truly realized, because then the other person brought out a trash bag and started throwing out stuff. But what's funny is that 99% of the stuff that the other person was complaining about was stuff that they got for themselves. And the majority of it was stuff that they bought for themselves and then never used. Or used it once on the first day that they got it, and then just never touched it again. It was just sitting up there. It was just sitting up there with the majority, like 90 to 80% of its content still left. Never touched again. And that trash bag filled up super fast. And just looking in it, I realized, like, none of this is nothing. There's nothing of mine up there. There's not. Look at all this food stuff getting thrown out. Look at all these ingredients. Look at all these things. All of these are for the other person. Not even a they're the majority of the cabinet gets emptied out and it's just a empty space, and then I look in there and it's like none of that. None of that there. It's like a piece of our it was like a telling example, a metaphor for our relationship, but just a natural consequence of our relationship, which is that I looked in there and I knew what was in there. The other person didn't. Yet 99% of what was in there, the other person bought for themselves, didn't touch, didn't use. And it was just all in the trash now. It's like, and then I've always ended up living minimal, where, my stuff is to the minimum, crammed into a corner. It's a metaphor for the time of day as well. Just like anything that was my work, responsibilities, tasks, whatever I had to do, whatever was my interest, tasks, responsibilities, whatever it was, just shoved into, a time corner of just 12 at night when I'm exhausted, can barely do anything, and it means that I'm going to end up waking up having gotten no sleep whatsoever. And then, of course, that's going to lead to a loop where I'm told that all I do is want to sleep, that I never have any energy for anything, I'm too tired all the time, or like lazy, or things like that. It was like a never-ending, self-defeating loop. But it was like the perfect metaphor to look at that. Like, what was up in those cabinets was either all the other person's or like a basic necessity that we both had to use, like cups or plates. But the rest was just like ingredients the other person got for a food that they wanted, that they liked, a snack that they liked or wanted, a piece of something that, was just for them. It was all that. It was all that. And you looked in the fridge. What I have now is basically what was then, which was minimal. There's no sweets, there's no dessert, there's no special snack, there's nothing that's really, for me in that sense. What's in the fridge is like, even when the other person was here, this is what I was eating. It was like a simple piece of chicken. It was something small, something, something like that. Something minimal. The other person, when I realized what the other person did with money, I realized that I had to try and offset, so I didn't ask for anything. When I wanted something, I never brought it up. And if I did, it would be treated as unreasonable, an imposition, inconvenient, or that I was, that I'm always asking for things that are out of the way or irresponsible, that kind of thing. Or it would be like, well, if you want that, how about you go make some money and get a job? That kind of thing. That's the tone I would be met with, even though for years upon years, I don't ask for anything. Not a thing. Not a single thing. And, the other person, the way they are, they're not thinking about other people. They don't really think to them. Unless I would get stressed or get tired, then the other person might do something out of appeasement, because they're thinking, oh, grumpy baby needs a nap, needs a bottle, would you like some candy, that kind of thing. Or just like, I've talked about this before, but it's not necessarily always that of like little baby. Sometimes it's just like, it's literally just like, yeah, it's just appeasement. It's just Like, I need to do something to get the person to calm down. In their mind, this is what they're thinking. I need to do something to get this person to calm down and go back to doing what I would like them to be doing, or thing, something like that. That's the gist of it. It's not out of like, oh, they're tired, they need a quick break. It's the kind of person who, when they bring up vacation, they're doing it to try and get you to, again, just more sort of love bombing, quick appeasement strategy, but there's no actual emotion behind it. There's no actual empathy behind it. And they'll quickly take it away if they do it to try and make you feel like an inconvenience, They do it to try and make you feel like you're being too much, like you're being selfish, or like you're causing stress and problems. And then, if you say, "Oh, never mind, that's all right," then they'll be like, "Okay, that's fine," or they'll either be like, "Okay, then we won't do it," or they'll be like, "Never mind," or they just won't say anything and never bring it up again. They won't say anything and they'll never bring it up again. And then, there is no vacation, there is no break. It's just back to, okay, do all these things. Do all these things for me then. That kind of thing. Because it's the kind of person who can't imagine someone else's internal emotional state or someone else's perspective or world or stress. They're only responding to the surface level of, oh, that person got a little snippier with me than I usually like. That person, oh, they're a little more stressed than I'm used to. How can I reset them back to, baseline function? It's that kind of thing. You're more utility to them. It's like, when an appliance, the wire runs a little hot one time, or it slows down for a second, or it makes a strange sound in an instance, and it's like, oh, it's not supposed to do that, how do I put it back? It's that kind of thing. Yeah. So, yeah. I went on all that, but basically I had a dream where the other person was going through all that again. But I should finish that thought. So yeah, just like, I don't really ask for anything, and then maybe like once every 3 years, once every 4 years, I would be like, "Hey, could I get this thing?" and would be met with, And if I wasn't met with that, it was entirely just for like, appeasement. Just sort of narcissistic gift giving. Yeah. Just like, here, have a treat. One of those kinds of gifts where there's an expectation of just like, cool, I got you this thing. Now make sure you never, disagree or do anything that would make me feel like you're trying to usurp me or dominate or anything like that, That's basically how it is. How's this chicken cooking? It's going good. Okay. Let me turn it up the heat a little more. There we go. It's that kind of thing. No actual real thought behind it or anything in particular. It's just empty appeasement. Though I will say it did get progressively more passive aggressive as time went on. as time went on, it did get increasingly more passive aggressive. So it was never like positive. It was always neutral, you know? There was like no real emotion attached to it. There was no real interest. And either that or it would become, an inconvenience, an imposition, that kind of thing. And, yeah, but one of the most telling things was that in order when I started setting more boundaries, one of the most telling things was that, I'm trying to think of a good way to word this, was that those things which were treated with passive aggression suddenly started getting offered freely, but very clearly, again, with no actual connection or feeling or emotion behind it. It was just, you know, maybe if I get you treat, you return, strings attached. There's like a contract essentially that goes along with it. I get you thing. This is all because I didn't get you the thing, is essentially what. It's like, why is this dog upset? Oh, you didn't give it a walk. You know, the most surface level sort of appraisal of the situation. Why is this dog upset? You didn't give it its treat. You didn't give it its bone. You didn't give it a walk. Why is this baby upset? You didn't buy it that ball that the child wanted. You didn't buy this child a ball. You didn't buy it the red one. You didn't buy this child the little car that they wanted. It's sort of like that. It's very much like that. Yeah. But when it came to things like buying an expensive stereo or hooking up surround sound or buying a $3,000 water filter, done without a second thought or hesitation. And the thing is it's not needed at all. In fact, it's completely unnecessary. In fact, the water that I drink now is essentially exactly how it was before the filter, because the filter is not particularly fantastic. I should say it's fantastic the first go around, and then each time you like switch out a filter or things, it gets faster at degrading, and so especially during the winter, I couldn't really go out there and do that. So it's essentially just been the regular water, and where I live, it's very clear, fresh, pure water. The person just kind of wanted it to want again, and also spending almost $2,000 on turbocharged like AC units. Again, yeah, there's benefits. Of course there is, but the problem is that we never needed them, and there's and also multiple $1,000s on awning stuff. It's ridiculous. And the thing is that none of it was needed. It was all, everything we had was very functional and capable. Like, yeah, I live with the benefits of it now, but that does not justify the cost of it. Of course it works better. Of course it works faster. It costs upwards of like $5,000, $6,000 to get this stuff installed. Of course it works better. It should for that cost, but that doesn't justify the fact that we couldn't afford it. Or they couldn't afford it. That doesn't justify that. Of course it works better. Of course the air is a little cooler. Of course it's a little faster. Of course the water is a little fresher. Of course the sun is a little less intensive. Of course it is. That doesn't justify the cost of it. The other person complained to me the other day, I'm still paying off $3,000. It's like, well, I was thinking to myself, well, then maybe you shouldn't have spent $3,000 on something that was never needed in the first place. And now the other person's paying $1,500 for an apartment that has all of that stuff built in. Yeah. But here, let me finish up my previous thought, which is like, yeah, I had a dream about that. And then it was just me navigating all their conversations and countering the attempts at manipulation and gaslighting and so on. And it was really stressful. It was very stressful. But, I managed it in my dreams. I can manage it in real life when I see that person. But, so yeah. One of the scariest things about this place is that, its title is not under my name. And the other person constantly threatens just taking it away and sticking it in storage somewhere. It's not under my name. And, I'm living in a place that's just full of the stuff bought with debt. And it doesn't even belong to me. Could be pulled out from under me at any time. It's like I'm standing on the rug, waiting for the rug pull, It could very much happen. Another thing is like, there was a winter where the other person invested almost upwards of $1,000, $2,000 in different, like, Dreo heaters, different models. And you know what? Ended up getting rid of all of them with no money and nothing back, nothing in return for it. Because the other person didn't want to go through the effort, was too impulsive, didn't want to go through the effort of taking the time to learn how to sell the stuff that we ended up buying. Fresh, primo, like, week-old, barely used heaters and fans and all that. And the other person was just like, I just want it out of the house. I just want it gone. Get it out. That kind of stuff, Just impulsively, like, okay, I don't need it. Get rid of it. That kind of thing. And would just shove it all in the back of a car, drive it off to Goodwill and give it away. Meanwhile, we're now down $1,000 plus dollars. $1,000 plus. We're down $1,000 plus, and you're already planning to buy. You said, okay, now we got to build up money so I can afford the next thing, only to immediately, like within the next day, already purchased the next one to try, the next one to test. No guarantee it would even be the one. And you know what? That one would also go to Goodwill. No money in return. Nothing for it. Just more and more spending, and then carting it off when it's doesn't meet expectations or isn't good enough, or stuff like that. Just gets, and then already onto purchasing the next thing, not even having paid off the previous ones. The other person is still paying off stuff from like 10 years ago. 10 years ago. and complains the entire time. Anyway, it's the kind of thing that just grinds my gears. So those are my dreams, and those are the little tangents that just led me on. But so, I made music all day yesterday. I was very proud of it. I like the composition I made. And then today, turn up the heat. Cook a little more. There we go. So today, woke up earlier, cooking myself some food. Was gonna play that hour of Metroid to upload for later, work, but got hungry, and now I'm here. Now I'm here. Yeah. Looking still for other work. I'm very disappointed in that, opportunity that just kind of ghost. Is that the call? Ghosting? Yeah. So, that's disappointing. That's very disappointing. That someone would do that. Someone would do that in the first place. But, yeah. In other news, in other stuff, one thing I forgot to mention from last time is that day of work that I talked about, that I was rather fond of, that day of work, there was a family in the corner who they ended up dropping a cup full of water all over the floor. Big puddle. And then I arrived. I got paper towels. I got proper, cloth towels. And I went to work. And I determined, there was a little girl. And it was directly under her. Big puddle. Had she stepped down, she was, having to practically lay on the seat. And if she would have stepped down, she would have stepped right into the puddle and, slipped. There was ice chips everywhere. So I enacted a little plan, a procedure. I gathered up the ice chips in the towel and then threw that out. And not the towel, but the ice chips. And then used the paper towels in conjunction with some other, cloth towels. And almost got it completely dry. But then one of my coworkers got, a little impatient and was just like, "Hey, I'll do that when I mop. You don't have to do that. Just let me do it." And so, I very quickly finished up what I was doing and then just left. It wasn't completely done, but, I let it be. So I was like, okay, that's fine. Of course, that coworker didn't do that. I mean, there was people there. Here's the thing, right? It's like there's a family here. I know you're not going to take that mop and do that right now, right in front of them. Also, it's a giant puddle slowly forming at their feet, directly under them. It's like, you're not going to do... I already know you're not going to... Not just that you're not going to do anything, not because you're lazy or anything, but procedurally that you can't really do much here with that. It would not be, proper or appropriate. That kind of thing. And of course, it didn't end up happening, so I knew it wasn't going to end up happening. So I did as much as I could. I got it to the level of, as they would finish eating, it would just evaporate on its own, which it did, thankfully. But yeah, so I ended that, and then I went to go clean menus. I went to go just, clean things up, wipe down. And then as I was up there, the family was leaving. And they showed a lot of gratitude. They were truly thank you so much for cleaning all that up and taking care of that and all that. And I was just like, oh, you're completely welcome. And it filled me with that feeling of warmth. But the main reason I bring it up is I felt a conflict and then a resolution in terms of my motivations and why I do specific things. And I realized that in the end, why I'm doing what I'm doing and my motivations and the goal. It isn't, it includes, the process includes my coworkers, but it is not for my coworkers. It's for the customers. It's for the people who are coming in and trying to have an experience and trying to eat. So, yes, I did temporarily frustrate or upset my coworker. Yes, she did go to the back and complain and talk about it. But in the end, those customers coming through and showing that kind of gratitude, I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't looking for it. I just kind of let that situation go. And I figured that they were just going to, walk out the door. I'd say my usual, see you next time, that kind of thing. And, that was that. But them doing that, it made me think about that. It clashed the two emotions of gratitude and this thing that these customers were giving to me emotionally and showing me. And then it clashed with my remembrance of me being slightly uncomfortable or awkward that my coworker was getting upset and, not wanting to anger them. And then I realized, weighing between the two of them, that one wasn't really as important as what just happened then, which was that these customers, this family, was very happy and they showed gratitude and thanks, and they ended up having a better experience for it. That it was worth, spending a few extra seconds than the other person than the coworker's patience really. But then, in the end, I realized yeah, that didn't really matter, did it? Yeah, their patience wore thin, but in the end, this family ended up having a better experience. The floor was dry, their daughter didn't slip, you know. It gave me that moment of pause to think about, what am I here for? What am I here for? What am I doing this for? Who is this for? Who is all this for? And I realized it's twofold. It's for myself, so I can live and have money and a place to eat. It may not be the best amount of money right now. It may not pay rent completely, but it does a good, healthy chunk of it, a healthy chunk. And, it's one for me. No, number one, it's for me, so that I can live, survive, even have interactions with other people, and then two, it's for the people who come in here. It's for the customers. It's for their experience. And it's also just nice to see them walk out with smiles and know that, hey, I kind of contributed to that. That was nice. I see them when they come in, I see them when they go out. I rarely see them ever in the middle. But sometimes that's nice. And then my coworkers, I've mentioned before. I mean, this isn't going to make me mind them less. It's just going to change how I react to when they start, doing specific things or things like that, I'm still going to mind them, if they start insisting that they'll take care of something and that, I'll leave. I'm not going to force it, but I'm going to respond differently now if they start acting or reacting that way. It's changed my perspective a little on how I respond to if they get angsted or upset whilst I'm trying to help customers or things like that, a slight shift in and the mindset about it, the perspective about it. But, you know, the method, the general procedure is going to be the same, which is making sure to mind them, assisting them, which ends up assisting myself, you know. But the end goal, the target goal, is adjusted a little. It's got a little more facets now than I realized before, which is nice, I felt very relieved at that thought. Yeah. So, I think I'll go ahead and that'll be it for now. Lately I've been doing more research and brainstorming ideas for that tick idea that I had a while ago. So, I'm going to keep on the side, after I'm done with working and stuff like that. I'm going to keep looking at that and expanding on it and seeing what I can do with that. And yeah, so. And, also mind the planning for some of the other video types I talked about before, like old art, looking at love children, so on and so forth. But that'll be it for now. All right.